Okay, I think this is going to be, hopefully this is going to be working. Let me check the ODS. 1, 2, 1, 2, that's good. Okay, awesome. All right, we're back. I did a really bad one before. Sorry, hello everybody. The last stream I did had no audio. I was just talking to myself about myself. No. So we're going to be doing a stream today. No one said anything in the other stream. I don't think YouTube was showing my stream to any people because it was no audio. Why would they show it out? So anyway, I'm going to be talking about answering some subscribers' questions today. I've got lots of people's questions to answer, and if you have a question, you can also ask it in the chat. Sometimes it's good to have a back and forward. So I've got some people ask. I've got some questions about personality types. I recently did another video on that, and I'll talk about that, and I'll also answer some questions about people's the length of treatment that's needed and the issues with that. I did a video recently about is it normal to feel worse before you feel better from acupuncture, because that was a question I was asked, and then someone asked a question from that one, so I'll jump into answering that first, and if you have a question, you're welcome to ask it as well in the chat. And welcome everybody. So sorry the stream is so late coming on, but I said I would do it. So some conditions in Chinese medicine take a long time, well, in any medicine, let's say, take a long time to treat because they've been going on for a longer amount of time. And there's a concept in classical Chinese medicine about functional and material, and that was the question that I needed to answer. So I'll start with the start of the question. They said they've been doing acupuncture and herbs for 7 months. They got relief from kidney issues, but it's a slow process. They said they were exhausted after a treatment and they go straight to bed, but they didn't think that they would need to do it for so long to get better. At one point, they thought that their issue was cured, but the pain returned a week after poor eating and drinking. So then, you know, it's great that some other people have jumped in and answered some things for them. And, you know, it is a frustrating thing when things aren't getting better. And that's I think it's not just frustrating for you, it's frustrating for practitioners as well. We want you to get better. Like, I don't, like, it's a conundrum in medicine because you're making a living out of doing the medicine, but I would rather see lots and lots of new patients in terms of help lots more people than have people not get better just so that they could come in for treatments. Like, that's not what I want for my business and my life. And I'm sure that patients don't want that either. So I want people to get better, and like there can be so many it could be multifaceted why that doesn't happen, or why it takes so long for things to happen. But it also can be things where if people are watching this, if they can let me know if the audio is good, that's great, because I can't hear it back here, and I'm assuming that it is, because the last one wasn't working very well, and it'd be good that it's good if it is working. I'm watching an ad from my own stream. Yep. So yeah, what I was going to say is people need to have, like, okay, so there's two aspects of I just want to make sure this is working before I keep talking. That's probably better for me to do that than I can't even find my own videos. I just want to know that the audio is working properly. If someone could tell me that, that'd be great. Because the other one wasn't. Okay. It's live now. Here we go. Okay, it is, but it's very soft. Okay, checking 1, 2. I hope this is working.
But it's very soft.
Okay, we go. There we go. Fix it now. So when people have a condition that they've had for a long time, it takes longer to treat it for sure. That's the thing, right? As long as things are moving in a positive direction, I said that on the comment to that person that's a good thing, because I wouldn't want patients to keep coming in and be like for a year and not getting better. Some practitioners might be able to give you an estimate of how long they think it will be, and they'll be like, this will take a year for you to get better. And there's some reasons why we can do that, like some evidence in that. Sometimes it's the practitioner's own knowledge of treating that particular condition. Like there's some things that I've treated with acupuncture, for instance, that I know people won't feel anything for 2 or 3 treatments. Like it's unlikely they're going to feel better. And one of those things that I found like that is plantar fasciitis, which is a heel problem where people get pain, excruciating pain when they wake up in the morning. And often the acupuncture treatments themselves can be painful. It can be hurting to do the treatment. But then once they get moving, they generally feel like, okay, the aches and pains of it is a little bit better. And as the day goes on, it's okay. And then wake up in the morning, it's like, oh, this excruciating pain again. But that's a good example of something where I know from lots of treatments where, in lots of patients having that treatment, I should say, that I'll tell people, just don't expect. It's great if something does happen in the first couple of treatments, but if it doesn't, then it doesn't mean it's not going to have an effect. Another thing that kind of hinders us giving people advice like this are the APRA regulations in Australia. Now, I'm not sure in other countries what kind of regulations they have, but Australia seems to have one of the strictest regulations now for these health practices. And part of it is an ethical thing that's good, and part of it is the regulatory guidelines that kind of, depending on how you interpret them, you could say, well, you could be breaching the guidelines by doing something that they call encouraging the unnecessary use of a regulated health service. That's the guideline. And what that means is, if I say, oh, you need to have treatments once a week for a year and you don't really need that, then I could be breaching those guidelines. And it's also unethical. And that's where it comes from, a place of like, oh, I just need the money. I want these patients. I can't lose these patients. I want them to come in, so they better come in every week. Or you might say something like, acupuncture is good whether you need it or not, right? In an advertisement, and that would be insinuating the unnecessary use of treatment. So some practitioners might find it hard to legitimately answer those questions, like how long am I going to need to have treatments, without breaking, like they might feel fearful that they might be breaching those guidelines. And then you've also got the other practitioners who don't know the guidelines, just don't even know them. They're not aware of them. That doesn't make it okay either. But in general, I'd be saying one way to consider this kind of thing is, if your condition is so bad that there's nothing else that was helping you, and you are getting some benefit from it, like you are getting better quality of life from it, and the cost that you're paying is not also impacting your quality of life so much that that's causing you detriment. So one of the degrees that I've studied is international health, and it's like a public health degree but in an international setting. And so you often look at conditions and things that are very broad based things, like these things called social determinants of health and things like that, which means like if a person, like let's say you're spending $100 a week on treatment or $200 a week on treatment and herbs, and your health is better, your work is better, you're able to do, like your life is better because of that, that's good. And it's not, the burden of that treatment cost isn't then causing you other problems in your life that would end up being health problems. So the burden of the treatment cost might be things like, now because I'm spending $200 a week, which is for some people, if that was 10% of their income, it probably wouldn't be a big deal. Like it's still a cost that they have to bear that they wouldn't have otherwise had to bear. But if it's 50% of your income, then it doesn't leave you much money to spend on the other things. And so that means that you might not be able to even afford to buy healthy food. Or, this is something we see now with the cost of inflation going crazy, where, you to push a shopping trolley around the store and fill it up with the food that you need might have cost you $200 or $100, and now it's costing you $150. I have found that recently. Like I've gone to the store, the last few times I've gone to the store to buy things, everything is a little bit more expensive, and so that means that then people have a burden on their system, the system that they're running, their household and stuff. So please feel free to answer your own questions. Ask questions if you'd like to. If you'd like to be part of the chat and part of the question asking. I'll probably run this for another 5-10 minutes. If people don't jump on the stream, I'll probably shut it down. It might not be a good time to run the stream. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it is. Sometimes I put this stream on, no one's here for half an hour, and then all these people jump on and I'm ready. I have to go. So we'll see what happens today. And I haven't done these for a while, so YouTube might not be notifying people that I'm even doing it. So yeah. What else can I mention about that? So I think one of the most important things is to work that out for yourself in terms of like, one is, if the treatment cost isn't overly burdening you and you are getting result from it, that's good. If you have gotten to a year of treatment, it might be time to seek a second opinion if you've plateaued out. So if you had really good results at the start and then it's kind of plateaued out, it might be that that's all that Chinese medicine can do for you, or it might be that that's all that system that practitioner practices can do for you. They might have reached the limits of what they can do, what it can do. Often with my patients, I'll get them to a point where they're on a maintenance level of herbs. Like we want people to be discharged and not be on herbs forever, but sometimes patients can be at a point where they can take the herbs at a much lower dose than when they first started, and that's considered a maintenance thing. And I'm very educational in how I do my Chinese medicine with my patients, so I sort of let them know, hey, if this happens, you call me straight away and we'll change this or we'll do that. If something else, like I hope that they can understand how to use the herbs and the dosages so that they don't have to be overburdened by the cost of the treatment. So that's one thing to consider. If the cost isn't overbearing you, because we're just talking about this question of how long do I keep going for treatments if it's not working, or it's not that it's not working. So for this particular person, it is working, but they are wondering if it's so long. They've done it for 7 months. Now, if you've had that condition for years before you came to the treatments, it's going to take a long time to treat it for sure. If you've had a condition for so this is another thing with the functional and the material change, is that sometimes we're not aware that material change is taking place. So the example of the functional is like putting petrol in your car and it running out of petrol. That's a functional issue. My car is not going to have any utility if there's no petrol in it. But there's nothing wrong with the vehicle, like, not that I know, right? But that's the whole thing, right? So I put petrol in it and I'm like, okay, I'm good to go. But there could be a problem under the hood if I never lift that hood up. I'm a bit of one of those people that's not that great at lifting the hood up. Then I might not know if there's something wrong with it. Yeah. And so that's where Chinese medicine pulse diagnosis can kind of come in, and that can kind of would give a practitioner, especially if they're a classical medicine practitioner, a very clear understanding of what's going on with your functionality and your material aspects. Like if you're really depleted, they'll be able to tell by your pulse instantly, like straight away. Now they might not be able to tell if you had a raging cold or a flu at the time and you needed to clear that out, and then they'd see what happens. But even still, there'll be ways that they can know just from the feeling of your pulse. That's a big way that Chinese medicine practitioners can tell. So the other thing is, like, we do want to get people to a point where they don't need, one is where they don't need herbs or acupuncture all the time, but also where their body's repaired to a point where it can work. Like, for instance, this person's question was like, they thought they were cured at one point, they said, and then the pain returned after a week of poor eating and drinking. So, like, there are things that are toxic to our bodies, but we should be able to tolerate some of that stuff. But then sometimes you've damaged your body so much by what you've done to it, or by what has been done to it. So it's not necessarily what you've caused, but what has happened. And it can be disappointing. It's definitely, I think it's disappointing just as much for the practitioner, or maybe not just as much because they're not in the pain, but it's disappointing for the practitioner as well as the patients for that sort of stuff to happen. Like, sometimes there's things where we just can't, I don't know, they just, like, it's got to the point where that's all that can be done. And so that's really a conversation that you have to have with your practitioner. Like, maybe we can, and I've got some patients like that where they've got chronic illness and they can maintain it, and they are better off doing the regular treatment, but it's got to that point where it's maintenance, kind of keeping that. And if they stop having the treatment, they actually deteriorate, which means the condition's still there, and it's still trying to forge ahead and get worse and worse. So I hope that is useful and helpful to answer your question. Now, I do have some questions about personality types. So if people have those, any questions are welcome in the chat. So put them in there. So I recently did a video, a funny video. Well, I thought it was a funny video about dating the 5 elements. Like, what are the different types like in dating, right? Because I've been working on a personality test, and I've been working on a course for people. So I have a one-off course, a standalone course on the personality types, and I wanted to make a test to be part of that thing. So I'm offering that to people for free. Only 100 people can do it on the account that I've got, and then it'll block off. So you can either sign up and do it now, or you'll miss out on it. So I'm opening up that for this month for people to just do that for free. So you can see the link in the description somewhere here of this video. I put it in the link to this description, and the test is also on the previous video that I did as well. And it takes about 10 minutes to do the test. I say 10 to 15, but most people seem to be doing it in 10 minutes. And there's a whole bunch of questions there, and I've designed the test myself. So I think it's not, personality tests are not the only way to find out, and certainly not the main way to find out for your 5 element type. So I want to give people I want to do a bit of a discussion about that. If people have questions on that, that's good. So one of the ways you can find out your type is by doing these tests, and it's good to do multiple tests, like different ones. It's the same as if you're into Myers-Briggs or the Enneagram or these other different things that are out there, the Big 5. Like, the Big 5 test is a longer test, and it's something that you generally, most of those tests that are the good ones are the paid ones. But the more you know about yourself, the better life will be for you. I've found that myself, because it helps you with your relationships with other people. It helps you understand why you do the things that you do, why some people just have a trouble procrastinating. And it also helps you if you're working on a project with something or in a business, and you think, like, I'm just so not great at this other thing. Who would be great at doing that? Or who should I look for to help me in that? Or even in a life partner situation, like what are good types of people, or how can, like, if you're already in a relationship with someone, you're like, how can we work better together, or how can I understand this other person? And I guess it's just because for me, I've often found it hard in life to understand other people. So I've spent a lot of effort learning about Myers-Briggs and other types, and like to try to understand why am I such a bitch to other people sometimes. And that's helped me. I hope it's helped me be a better person, and less of a bitch to them. But so this is one of the things. Now, what's good about the 5 element types is, one, there's only 5, so it's easier to identify them. Like with Myers-Briggs, there's 16 types, and it's quite complicated to find out your type. And with the downside of the 5 element types and the understanding that they have, or there's 2 other aspects I want to talk about. One is that we have all the types within us, and we can be all of those things. So you might find that, oh, I have all these traits within me anyway. Well, how do I know what type I am? And the second one is that, like, we can be a certain type and then become out of balance, and actually you can see things that are really distorted in that type. Like, for instance, the metal type likes usually aesthetically pleasing things. They often become things like architects, and like they like order and neatness, and order in like, they're very moral coded sort of people, but in a distorted state or in a pathological state, they can actually become a hoarder, which is completely the opposite, right? A hoarder's cluttered, there's just so much stuff. So instead of having minimal, like being a minimalist almost, and I'm sure that the people that have purported this minimalist ideas are metal types, or they have a strong affinity to that type. So yeah, like they can then become a hoarder, and that's bizarre, isn't it? Like, you think, well, so if you score on that test and you're like, do I have a clean and neat home? Or they might like clean and neat, but they've got a very messy home. It's really strange in that way. So every one of us, going back to that first part, every one of us has all the types within us. Like, these are all qualities that human beings have. And it's similar to when you think about with Myers-Briggs as well. Like, it's about preference. It's about what you prefer to do. Like, if I was left to my own devices and I could just get on with life and do what I really want to do, how I want to do it, well, that's what the types are about. So when you're answering those questions, or you're thinking about it for yourself, like, I can do all these other things. Like, I can have for me, like, I don't really have an appreciation of architecture that much, like a little bit. I can have that, but it's not something I have to have, or it's really important to me. So when you're thinking about doing those tests, that's something to think about, is like, is this really important to me? Like, is this do I think about this highly, or is it just something that, I could have, I could take it or leave it. Right. Now, sometimes in those questions, the way I've worded the questions, I've given people scenarios to think about, like, if someone gave you $100, how would you spend it? And that type of a question tells you, what do you value the most with money, right? So if you're going to save it, you're going to spend it on someone else. Like, if you'd rather spend it on somebody else, that says that you value either the experience that you're going to get with somebody else, or that you value other people more than your own self. Some people find it very hard to spend money on themselves, or to value themselves, and those are generally, like, earth types of people, like, are much more concerned with other people's happiness, and like, almost focusing on other people's happiness makes them happy and gives them satisfaction in life. So please feel free to chip in to the conversation here if you would like to, or if this is something you're interested in hearing about. As more people jump into the stream, we don't have to talk about personality types. We can talk about other Chinese medicine things. But yeah, so that's something to think about, is if you're interested in learning about the types, we do have all those types in us, but it's about what you prefer to do. Now, one, you might have seen on the channel, I interviewed a practitioner called Lita Herman, and she runs this thing called the Alchemy Learning Center, and this Inspired Action podcast, and that's a really good one to get into. Her and a colleague of hers run a podcast. I think they put an episode out once a month, but there's so many episodes you can go back and listen to all of them, and it's a really good way of thinking about the 5 elements in the personality types. And they also talk about this thing called alchemy, which is the idea of transcending, doing your life's work, the work of that element. And the idea of a sage is a person that kind of transcends all the elements, that can become all of the elements and not just bound by that one element. So where it starts is acknowledging what element you are, I guess, or the two ones that you rank highly on. So if you do these tests and you think, oh, sometimes I'm wood and sometimes I'm fire, and they're similar, to, like that you might be ranked very highly on two of those and not so much on the others. And they call that an element stack. Like your first one is the top one, where so let's say you had 20 points for wood but 18 points for fire. Well, you're very close to both of those things being predominant things for you. So, oh yeah, we can definitely talk about the fasting question. That's a great one. Thank you. I will talk about that. Yeah, so that's part of it is your stat. You have all of those in you, and some people are very prominently one and less prominently the others. But what I find it's useful to think about is also like your relationships with other people. When you butt heads with someone, you think, why don't you just get this? Why don't you just and it doesn't really matter if you follow the 5 element system or Myers-Briggs or other systems. Like if you can understand, well, that person's doing those things because they prefer these other ways or because they prefer this. What I like about 5 elements is it's easier to understand other people's types because there's only 5. Whereas it's very hard to type out. You have to really get into Myers-Briggs to type out other people. You just can't you can hardly do it. I've spent a lot of time thinking about it and trying to do it. Anyway, I'm going to answer this question about fasting. So, hi from San Diego, California. I know it must be late for you. It must be up late, which is good for me, but maybe not so for you. I'm curious to know how TCM views intermittent fasting and prolonged water fasts. Yeah, so water fasts, as in prolonged, like how long do you mean? Like a week? A long time. So obviously with fasting, you want to follow your doctor's directions and don't go, I'm not promoting anything here, because water fasting can be quite dangerous for people if they any fasting changes. I'm not giving people individual health advice. But yeah, so check with your practitioner or your doctor before you embark on any of those things. And so, yeah, fasting, this is a really interesting question because when I was taught TCM, we were taught fasting's bad in Chinese medicine. Like, why would you rob your body of essential food that it needs? But what I have found through the practice of living as a human in the last 20 years, that people generally eat too much food, and those things were purported and talked about in a different time period where people didn't overeat and they didn't overconsume calories, and that's a big thing. So you might have a lot of packety types of foods or partially prepared foods. So some people cook a pasta, for instance, they use a jar sauce and pasta, and they're like, oh well, I've cooked my pasta. Even just having a fridge and being able to store things means you don't just kind of eat that meal and then the meal's over and that's all I can do. Like, you can heat food up late at night. So what I'm saying is, in general, people do eat way too much food. So fasting can be really beneficial for people from a Chinese medicine perspective. So there's a few principles that you want to adhere to, and I do have a big course on this. I'm about to finish a 12-week course on Chinese diet therapy for self-care, like all the things that we talk about, fasting and all that stuff in there. And it's broken down into smaller courses, so you can take smaller parts of it. So I do have a 3-week course on better gut health, and it kind of explains what I'm going to explain now in a lot more detail. So there's about 7.5 hours of training of me talking. There's PowerPoints and slideshows and whatever as well, and handouts in there. So in general, we want to make sure that people adhere to warm, cooked and moist, and stay away from cold, dry and raw. And so if that's happening in your diet, you're generally helping your spleen and stomach to work properly. And the other principle that relates to fasting more is this regularity. So your stomach likes regularity. Now, I've done fasting before myself. I've done lots of different kinds of fastings, mostly for spiritual reasons, not for weight loss or anything like that. And like, there's a few things that can happen when you do fasting for a spiritual reason that I think you're sustaining your body from a different purpose. And I don't think Chinese medicine really cares too much about that. They don't think about that. And those prolonged fasts, like 40-day fast or something, like you have to have a spiritual connection or something to sustain you. You're not being sustained by, that's a biblical thing or a spiritual connection thing. It's not I wouldn't suggest people do those sort of prolonged fasts without that reasoning, right? So I'm not sure how long you mean by a prolonged water fast, but I don't think Chinese medicine really thinks water fasting is a good idea. Like we would probably think it's not good. It probably doesn't fit into the process of Chinese medicine very well, because it might be maybe with a light broth, like a bone broth or something, that could be okay. Now it depends on what the person's original problem is. And other things to consider with fasting are that your lifestyle has to change as well. Like if you're going to do a fast for a long time like that, or a water fast even for 2 or 3 days, like your metabolism's going to slow down. You can't do lots of exercise. You have to, allow more time for those things. And, that's why it's part of it is a spiritual practice, I think, because it makes you realize, oh, I'm getting angry and I shouldn't be getting angry or snappy or this kind of stuff. So it's highlighting those things for people often in those fastings. Now, intermittent fasting is much more in line with this idea of like, well, we might be just eating too much food, so let's just cut down on the calories that we have. And whatever you do, if you can keep it regular, that fits into Chinese medicine. So your stomach likes to be full and empty, not grazing all day long. That's a big part of it. So if that stops you from grazing, good. If you're so hungry at the end of that fast that you're binging out and eating massive meals, like, oh, my window of time to eat, I'm going to, smash all this food down, that's not good. If you've got the discipline though, and sometimes what happens with fasting over, like if you've done a longer period of fasting, or you've done done it regularly, your stomach shrinks down, so you don't actually need as much food anyway to feel full. So your eyes might be like bigger than your stomach now. So you're thinking, oh, I'll eat a whole plate of food, but you actually can't even fit that in. So that's part of it. So I think regularity is important. Some people in Chinese medicine think intermittent fasting in the morning isn't so good because that's more the time we should be eating. I would say we shouldn't be eating it in the night more than, like, it's better to eat in the morning. But I know a lot of people do intermittent fasting in the morning so they can have a more productive time, like because they're able to think better. And that certainly plays into Chinese medicine with your spleen and stomach as the cooking pot on the stove. It's this idea of like, okay, it's separating the pure and impure. It's doing all this work. So your spleen does two things, or your your earth element does two main functions there. It does digestion, but it also does thinking. So your spleen's attributed to thoughts, which is intellect. The yi is associated with the spleen. So it's like you can't do both of those things very well when you are, certainly when you're really full. It's the whole, after lunch, sleepy time. You're not very productive then. So I follow some of the stuff, like Andrew Huberman is a really good neuroscientist podcaster. He has many interesting science-based articles, and sometimes I listen to what he's saying and think, yeah, that makes so much sense. Even just from a Chinese medicine perspective, some of that stuff makes a lot of sense about how to be more. So if you're doing intermittent fasting for being more productive, he sort of promotes this idea of like doing it in the morning and doing your special work that you want to do, or your deep work or whatever, first thing in the morning. I think fasting, like that is good for people's discipline if they don't have a discipline. And that's part of our society now, where we just have everything available whenever we want. And if you know, like I remember when I was a kid, like there was a lot of discipline in our house, like about things, because that's what your parents do, right? Well, most parents do. They, you know, you have this, you have that. No, you can't have this now, you know, like foods and stuff. And then when you're an adult, or as I was becoming a teenager, I was like, you know what? I'm going to eat what I want, whenever I want it, because I can. And I remember moving out of my own house and just going, yeah, I can do what I want. Not that my parents were telling me what I could eat when I was like living at home at 16 or 17. But sometimes that never changes for an adult. And they're just like, yeah, I can do what I want any old time. And yeah, we can, but we need the discipline, right? And I'm talking to myself now too, like we need that. And sometimes intermittent fasting provides a framework for discipline that might be hard to achieve in other ways. So it could be good in that. But I'm not sure, you haven't sort of replied about how long the water fasting is. I'm not sure how long it would be, but if it was more than 2 or 3 days, I don't think Chinese medicine would, even a day of I don't think would be good for you. Just fasting on water. Unless, of course, it's that spiritual kind of reason, and I think you're sustaining yourself from something else. Yep. All right. So if people have other questions, they can surely ask them in the comments. You can ask whatever you like about. Yeah, that's what I was saying about yeah, but 5 days fasting, that's not intermittent fasting, right? 5 days. What do you mean by 5-day fasting? Fasting on what? Nothing, water, like, so yes, Chinese medicine doesn't support that kind of thing, but intermittent fasting, where you're just not eating for 12 hours or not eating for, you know, you're having an 8-hour, a 5-hour window where you eat, or you have 2 meals a day and then you don't eat for that other period of time, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Yep. Yeah. So I think the spiritual aspect is not, it's not encompassed by Chinese medicine. Like they're not thinking about that. You could think about that for many reasons. Like there's communistic influences in Chinese medicine books, often, in the writings that we have now. So they don't, and those kind of spiritual practices, like, are something that's going to sustain you throughout the fasting. That like you're being sustained by something else. That the water, it's not just you're being sustained by the water. And Chinese medicine doesn't really have an understanding about that. I wouldn't be able to do. I don't think just water by itself for more than a day is good for you in Chinese medicine. So I have to kind of say that. But if it was, yeah, I get that people do it for other reasons. So one of the things that your body likes is regularity, right? So whatever you do, if you keep it regular and you regularly do something, even if it's on a cycle of, like you're saying, you know, every 2 months you do this thing, then your body will get used to that regularity by itself, and that in a way could be good. Yeah, Andrew Huberman's great. Like, I think what he says about your eyes and you're looking at the light. Like when I heard him talk about that, I was like, it just makes so much sense in Chinese medicine about like setting your circadian rhythm, and the looking at the, like, having the light into your eyes in the evening. I'm gonna really fuck up the way that he said it, because he says it. I don't know the science to tell you exactly it, but yeah, you've got to watch the one about the setting your circadian rhythm with the eyes, because that can be really a game changer for people that don't that are really wired late at night. Like I'm doing something that he mentioned before. Like you can probably see there's a massive bright light on my face because it's morning time now for me, and he's like, if you travel a lot, you know, you put a bright light in front of you. If you're like in the room I'm in now, it's there's no windows in here. It's a studio room. I'm in my music studio actually doing this. So there's no there's only artificial light. So if I put a massive bright light in front of my face, it really wakes you up, and it's good. Yeah. So going back to that fasting, like, so you want to, the other thing is after you finish a fast, you've got to coax your digestive system back into it. And it can like physiologically, it can be damaging to you if you don't do that. And yeah, but I on one hand I'm saying, like, there's some reasons why people do things that they get other benefits out of that I don't think Chinese medicine fully incorporates and understands all that. The other thing is, if you are eating, what fasting can do for people that isn't really understood well in Chinese medicine is that if it provides you that discipline, so that, like, let's say before the fasting time you are just gorging yourself, or being undisciplined in your eating, and you notice that as a result of the fasting, after that times you actually feel you've actually changed your body, that can be a benefit in itself. So that period of fasting might not be that great for you, but then you're actually providing that discipline to your life. That's good. I've got this little book in Chinese medicine called, like, Longevity Practices of People. It's a little tiny book that I bought in Shanghai once. It's in English, and it's got all these longevity diets of these old people that have lived to like 110 and stuff like that, and it interviews them and talks about their stuff. And a lot of them only have broth once a day as a food. Like, that's all they have. But one of the things they found with all these people is they regularly eat. Like, they have the same food, and they have very plain food, and they have it very regularly. So that's important, right? So that's what I mean by broth might be better. If a person was very damp, going back to what I was saying about it might reset their body or help them to have that discipline, or they were addicted to things like having a lot of sugar or stuff like that, and then they go onto this fast and then they don't seem to need those foods as much, that's good. And also if they were, like, if you're already depleted, like you're blood deficient, fasting probably isn't going to be good for those types of people. If you find it hard to keep weight on, you're very withered, and you have to lie down a lot and sleep a lot, then fasting might not be great for you. If you're doing a lot of practices that are making you sweat and you're fasting, that's probably not great. Like, that might deplete you more. So yeah, bone broth is a good thing to have to nourish your blood. So if you were just going to have one food instead of water, you could just do the bone broth as a way of, like, helping your system have some nourishment there. Yeah, and there's like so many nutrients in bone broth. And sometimes people, when they say they do fasting, they still take vitamins or stuff like that as well, and that can be providing them nutrients that they wouldn't otherwise have. But yeah, I can't sort of support long times of fasting with no food in terms of Chinese medicine, but also just people need to check with their practitioner before they do those things, because I'm not saying do that, because some people they might have diabetes or something they don't know about, and they could have a serious health problem get exacerbated. Oh, that's good, Sean Kim. I'm glad you appreciate the videos. Glad someone likes it. No, there's lots of people that like it. Actually, the other day I was scrolling through the comments to find videos that I needed to answer, and I was like, oh, there was some that I just had missed, people's comments. And yeah, there's lots of lovely comments there, and sometimes I just missed seeing them, and it's lovely that people find it good. So you say, I've gotten so enthusiastic about TCM and Korean Sansang medicine. I enjoy learning about acupuncture points at the moment. You're able to use it when my customer fainted. Oh, that's awesome. Fainted in front of me about cut off. That's great. Sansang medicine, Korean. So is that the Korean hand acupuncture? Is that what that is? Because Korean use some of the same as Japanese. They use some aspects of Chinese medicine, but they have their own system, and we don't really learn it much in TCM school. Like, they mentioned Korean hand acupuncture, but it's something that people might do that people might do as an elective or something afterwards as well, or go into studying that. Yeah, cool. Used acupressure to bring consciousness back. Yeah, there's quite a few points that can bring back consciousness. It's really interesting. I was teaching this in a class last semester, and one of the points that we have in Chinese medicine, so most, just so people know watching this, that's great that they revive. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it can work. Yeah. I think, yeah, there's a few, which I'm not sure which points you use, but there's lots of points on the hands that, like, let's say these are called Jing Well points. And these are commonly used for reviving consciousness, especially if someone had a febrile thing, like they were very fevery. These kind of points would be used. This one here can be used a lot, like right on the chin there. That's a common one. And there's one in the perineum, right? So between the well, I think people know what a perineum is. You can look that up. Down there. Downstairs. So midway between the anus and the end of the scrotum, or the start of the vagina. So midway between there. Now, I know some practitioners who use that in acupuncture. It's not commonly used in Australia. It's not even taught in Australian schools. Like we don't, as in we don't teach the needling of it. But in this class, I was teaching this channel, the Ren channel and the Du channel. So there's a point there between, basically meeting between those two channels. It's on the Ren channel, Ren 1. And one of the students in the class said that he knows a skydiver who had a student who had passed out in the air. And they didn't know Chinese medicine, but he'd come across this story. And the person, so the instructor was there with the person, and they were in the air, and this person had passed out, and apparently, like, if they didn't come to, they wouldn't be able to do their own. They might die they might not be able to land properly because they need to be able to do their landing, right? And so he was trying to revive this person in the air, like wake them up, slapping their face, doing different things that they do. And then he used that point. Now I think it's because they must teach it in their training, but he just put his thumb right between there and the person came to, and they were able to just deploy their parachute and land on the ground safely. So it's interesting to know that like it obviously, this person who wasn't a Chinese medicine practitioner, that was the skydive instructor, so it's a point that's obviously known. But I can't imagine you being a first aider and having to explain that's what you've done, because you might be just done for assault. So I would never use that point on someone, like, unless it was a person that I was a family member. Even a family member you might get accused of something. But yeah, unless it was sort of, I try a lot of other things first. But yeah, if you don't have acupuncture needles and you're an acupuncturist, or you're just a layperson doing it, you can use the corner of your nail, like, to really press in as hard as you can. So you say sarsang is a little different from TCM. Yeah, okay. Korean sarsang has 4 to 8 body types, depending on who you talk to, and then treat them accordingly with acupuncture and herbal medicine. Yeah, that's interesting, right? So this idea of body types and constitutional types is, like, really interesting. All right, someone says, Dan, what has TCM got to say regarding dairy? Is it good, bad, or in moderation? So just go back to the fainting. Yeah, so I would use this one first. So you have to follow your first aid instructions first. I think that's the first thing. So your ABC, or Dr. ABC that they use in Australia, like your danger, airway, and all that. Call the ambulance or whatever you're going to do for them. But yeah, you can use this point here, and you can just kind of press into it as hard as you can. Even if you press on it yourself, it's very uncomfortable. Or like normally. The Do 20, it's probably harder for lay people to kind of find that, but they could just press on the head real hard. It's at the vertex of the head, so if you poke your ears up, and you go straight up, and that way, that's Do 20. Now, that's a very commonly used point in acupuncture to keep I don't want to say revive consciousness because I don't have people pass out as a matter of course, but it actually prevents people from feeling lightheaded when they feel faint. So sometimes with acupuncture, people do pass out from the treatment. I've even had a patient once have an epileptic seizure like during the acupuncture treatment. So the do 20 is a point that we would use to help revive people's consciousness or stop them from passing out in the treatment. That's something that a practitioner would go through how to do that. Like they'd learn how to do that in their training, because there's some situations like if someone's like, for instance, if someone had a seizure, you have to take all the needles out and obviously protect them. Like when it happened in my clinic, your first thing is the safety of the person, and you can't be sticking more needles in while they're having a seizure. Like you wouldn't be doing that at all, right? And after they've had a seizure, you wouldn't be doing any more acupuncture on them either. Okay, so the dairy, yeah. Look, in general, everything's in moderation. If you already have a damp condition, you definitely don't want dairy. That will probably aggravate it. If you have like snot, like a kid has a runny nose or they're very snotty, that kind of thing, and you put dairy in the mix, it's definitely going to make it worse. And I just finished recording a course. I haven't put it out there yet for kids, like weaning kids. And the dairy thing is a really big one to avoid for at least the first 3 years of their life, if you can, because the kids have a different metabolism, a different constitution to adults. Their spleen and stomach is still developing, so that's something that I would avoid. Now, I've done a video about cheeses because I love cheese and people seem to like videos about dampness on my channel. So I did a video about the cheese, different types of cheeses, and that will help you understand dairy in terms of cheese. So anything that's creamy and rich from dairy, the more creamier and the richer it is, the more dampening it's going to be. Now you can have that in a small quantity and you might be okay. So let's say you like coffee and you just want some cream in your coffee, or you want milk in your coffee. Like having this much coffee and this much milk is different to having this much milk and this much coffee, right? And you can know for yourself. Like I particularly know when I'm a singer, and if I go to the studio, I will not have a milky coffee that day. If I'm going to do vocal recording or something, if I'm going to do a gig, I won't have any milky coffee for that whole afternoon, because I can feel it now in my throat. I've been drinking the coffee, and if I have coffee and talking, there you go. You can hear it. It's just going to make you phlegmy. If you're already a bit phlegmy, then that's going to make you more phlegmy. So it depends what you're doing, how much you love dairy. Like, can you give it up or not? Like, I switched my milk to A2 milk, and I find that really useful. Like, I find that so much better on my body than the stock standard milk. So again, this is a conundrum with all the foods, unfortunately. Like, they're so like bastardized from what the foods should be sometimes, like with all these processings that's done to them. So the milk you buy off the shelf, like, and it's, the milk I buy now, this A2 milk, is $6 a litre, $6 for 2 litres, sorry, which our normal milk is like $2.50 for 2 litres. So it's expensive, and I understand, like, it's, the other option would be like plant-based milks. So if you're very damp and you love dairy, I'd say just have a bit of hard cheese and maybe yogurt, because yogurt's fermented, and fermented dairy acts differently in your body than, it's not as dampening. And avoid full cream milk, avoid heavy cream and creamy sauces and stuff like that. If you are really, really yin deficient, in terms of you're very withered, you find it hard to put on weight, you're maybe elderly people and you're not really eating much food, dairy is actually used as a nourishing food. Like, there's recipes for milk porridge, butter porridge, butter congee, like these kinds of things. I certainly wouldn't have margarine. I've only ever had butter. I would highly encourage people to use that butter or oil, not margarine. I think most people know that now, but yeah. So what has TCM got to say regarding dairy? Is it good, bad, avoid, or moderation? So in general, also think Chinese never really had dairy as part of their culture. It's only come in the last 10 to 20 to 30 years. So when I was in China the first time in 2001, it was very hard to get cheese. Like, you just couldn't buy cheese. I had to go to Shanghai from Hangzhou just to get cheese. There wasn't cheese around. Now there is, because there's lots more Westerners in China, and that has come in and they know what it is, right? Like, they didn't even have pizzas then. Like, pizza restaurants were just starting up. I was there when the first Starbucks opened, and the coffee was just becoming a thing. Right now, lots of Chinese have coffee, and they know about these things and they've enjoyed those things, so it's part of their culture a little bit more now. And this is the first time where you're seeing fat people. So it's not just dairy. They're not as active as they were. People aren't as active there. Like, they're not riding their bicycles to work as much as they were because they can afford to get cars, and this kind of stuff is all part of it. But yeah, I don't think dairy is necessary for us to have in. One is okay. I wouldn't say TCM thinks it's necessary for you to have. So it's not like, you have to have it for the nutrients. If you're worried about calcium, bone broth, and chicken stock, and actually chicken feet. I don't eat chicken feet, but that has like a lot of calcium in it. Chicken feet have a lot of collagen in it as well. That's why they love chicken feet. So yeah, Sean Kim style says do 20 and in between the nose and the lip, yes, and use pericardium 8. Yep. So on the hand here, these points, you have to really be a bit more knowledgeable to use them, because you have to really push in, right? Like this is pericardium 8 here, and that would be a good one for reviving, and that's probably what you used. I think you said that. Large intestine 4 and stomach 36. Yeah, so good. I mean, you're stimulating, like, if you think about consciousness it resides in your heart, so it's in the fire elements. That's why the pericardium 8 would be good. There's an idea in Chinese medicine, like, don't disturb the emperor, like, just knock on his door and the attendant will kind of help you out, and that's the pericardium. Like, don't make the emperor angry. So that's the heart aspect. I just need to check what I've got a client coming soon, so I've got to check what time that is. Right. I've got 15-20 minutes left I can do on this. Cool. So yeah, Poppy says, I feel like part of my body is quite dry, cracking joints, no phlegm problems. Yep, but part is damp. Female parts are damp and cloggy. How would you approach that dampness without aggravating the dry? Yeah. Thank you for thanking me. I'm glad you enjoy the videos. And yeah, this is a really common thing, because when you've got dampness, it's a fluid metabolism problem ultimately. So what's happening is your body's not able to metabolize the fluids properly, and it's creating like this dampness, this thick pathogenic fluids being created. But sometimes actually that, because there's that fluid metabolism problem, your body's not actually even moistening itself properly, right? So often so dryness can be associated with blood deficiency, and that could be one thing that's going on right now. If you tonify blood, you're not necessarily going to aggravate dampness. So by tonifying blood, the main thing would be bone broth. That would be great for the dryness because it's got plenty of collagen in it. Another thing you could do is like just higher quality meats, meaty stews, chicken stock, chicken broths. you can make, you want to avoid too much sweet if you have damp, because that will make dampness worse, like sugary and sweet and stuff like that. But the blood nourishing foods won't make you more damp, so that would be one way of trying it, trying things out. A way that we moisten dampness in Chinese medicine sometimes is by, like, there are herbal formulas that can do that, and we use like pungent flavors to push the fluids to the exterior of the body, and sour sort of contains it. Now, you can't really do that so much with foods, but just to let you understand that is a process in there. But what you can do is exercise, and sweating does that. Now, if you're blood deficient, you don't really want to sweat because it's wasting the fluids that you do have. But this would be a way of thinking about, this is how saunas can sometimes work for people. So you go in a sauna and you get really hot and you sweat, and then you go in the cold plunge and you stop that sweating. So you're basically moistening the body. And this is why saunas are really good for people with arthritis, or like, yeah, the cracking joints and the pain and all that sort of stuff. Then the cold will kind of freeze that area so that the sweating doesn't continue on, because that's the problem with sweating. If you're blood deficient, you don't want to be sweating all day long, because you're actually going to become more, you're going to get more dry, right? Because you're using up some of that moisture. So if you're seeing a practitioner, they can probably help you with a formula. Like, if we were to check your pulse, that would kind of tell us at the time what is the most prominent thing. Like, we have to treat that prominent thing now. So sometimes by nourishing your body then raises its function and it resolves up the dampness. I'm not sure what you mean by, oh, the damp is down, the downstairs thing. So actually that might not, it can be dampness, but actually what can happen is, like, lots of fluids can be created down there and make leukorrhea, like a abnormal vaginal discharge or something, and or a thrush or a candida kind of problem, because there's not enough yang to transform those fluids properly, and they just kind of are accumulating in that way. So actually, truly, the nature of the problem is more deficient. It's not just about flushing out the damp, like clearing out the damp kind of thing. So you could probably try by tonifying more, and this is where it gets more complicated. That's why practitioners kind of sometimes needed to cut through and help you kind of get through that area. Okay, so Sean Kim says, if I ever get interested in studying TCM legitimately, what would you recommend? What country are you in? That's probably the first thing to ask. I have a course that I'm doing. It's not a certified course. It's for self-learning, and that is, I've created a 1-year program. I don't have that open, the whole 1-year thing open at the moment, but I've taught out the first, so it's 3 lots of 12 weeks, and I've taught out the first 12 weeks is all on foundational concepts of Chinese medicine. Like, I'm just trying to think what's in it. I can't remember now. Then the second part. Oh, so I go through like the how to prevent colds and flus using understanding like the Shanghan Lun system for self-care. So understanding how we get sick from the environment, and there's 3 weeks kind of on that, and then there's a 12-week part on Chinese diet therapy. And that's very detailed, all different things. So some of the weeks is just looking at, okay, here are all the grains, what are their properties and how would we use them, what's about gut health and all that sort of stuff. I'm in the process of putting some of those courses as a on-demand course. And there's some that you can get. I'm just going to give you the link. This is still... It's in progress at the moment, but at the top of the link Um, well, so yeah, on demand courses, there'll be some. Uh, there's some available there, and there's some that are not. So the first two are available. It takes me time to take them from when they were done live to make them into an on-demand course, like to put it all together. So they're in process. So if there's something there that you want to study, then you can contact me, and I'll try to find the link for you so that you can actually sign up for it. So that's, if you jump on that page, there's a thing where you can book a call with me, and we can chat about what your learning needs are and work that stuff out. That's probably the best way to go about it. If you want to study to be a practitioner, so maybe tell me what country you're in, because you probably have to do, well, you will have to do it in person, right? You will have to do some of it in person. The course that I would highly recommend for Chinese herbal medicine, it's not an acupuncture course, would be ICEAM, the Institute of Classics in East Asian Medicine, and that's what I studied most recently to learn the classical system, and that teaches you the pulse-based. It's a lineage system of Chinese medicine, which means it's a system that was passed down through the different generations. And Arno Versluis is the main teacher, and he's certified like 3 or 4 other people that do it as well. And they do different courses all over the world. They have an online component. It takes about 3 years to become a herbalist in the Shanghanlun system and then the Jingwei system. So that gives you an understanding of how to treat patients using those systems, which basically covers all the conditions that can happen to people within those 2 things. But it's not designed for people who've never done Chinese medicine before, although I know some people who haven't done herbal medicine before and they've done it, but it's not designed for those people. And it's not certified as a standalone course anywhere in the world so that's why I asked where you are, because the problem it will become like you need to be certified by recognized by your governing body if there is one. So if you're in a country where there is no governing body and you can just practice, it's going to be different, and it really comes down to your ethical okay, I'm not just going to say I'm qualified when I'm not, but it's if you're in a place where they're saying, okay, like in Australia, for instance, we have ARPRA that governs the recognition of certain professions, and Chinese medicine has become one of those professions. So if you don't do a course that's recognised there, then you won't be allowed to practice. So maybe tell me where you are when you get a chance. Right. So Poppy says, wow, you nailed it. Been mostly vegan for years. Right, there you go. Sorry about that. Sorry for your loss. I'm not laughing though. I am. I don't believe it's healthier, but it's a deep ethical. Yeah, exactly. And look, this is a big conundrum that I find with people all over I didn't even think about the vegan thing, but that's it. So it probably is a blood deficiency issue. Now, there are ways to help if you're a vegan and you're blood deficient. I actually made a video on that. So I would just stick to the mostly cooked foods. Really, if you're a vegan, you want to avoid raw smoothies. Like, that's a big one. If you can just avoid that, you're probably going to help so much more of your dampness, because if you have a lot of cold stuff, it just makes your body work so much harder to digest everything that's going on. It just has to work so hard to do that. And it can then just be really like it's working so hard, so it's getting depleted over time. And so that raw smoothies don't hurt you when you have one, but it's like if you're having them all the time, where you have a lot of cold stuff. Yeah. And I've had some vegans that are like, oh yeah, I'll have the bone. Like, I get that it's not vegan. Like I've got some patients that won't even wear leather shoes. They're fully committed to it. And it's a different, people do different things for different reasons. And yeah, so try those things. I always try to build blood through herbs, but it doesn't feel like it's enough. Yeah. Yeah, it is something to think about. Like, I was a vegetarian for, I don't know how many years, 9 years, I think. And I remember going into Chinese medicine school and my teacher was like, you will become a meat eater. And I was like, no, I won't. I will never. I'll never become a meat eater. Like, I wasn't a vegan. I was just a vegetarian. But I didn't eat anything meaty. Like I said, I used to say, I'll have nothing with a face. And I was quite healthy. I wasn't unhealthy. You know, in some ways I feel like sometimes I want to go back to being a vegetarian because it just meant that I never ever pretty much ever had takeaway foods. I never would, because you can't just go through a KFC drive-through when you're vegetarian. And so it just made you be so much healthier. You had to cook everything for yourself. Like, you can also be an unhealthy vegetarian. Like, you can just sit there and eat chips and cheesies and stuff, like, and still be a vegetarian, right? But yeah, being a vegan probably makes you so much healthier because you're just not going to eat as many processed foods because they're just not available to you. So you just have to cook it all. It's like when I became paleo I think I did the paleo diet for like 3 months, and you have to cook everything. You can't buy anything. Like, you can't eat anything processed. You have to, cook it all yourself, which is good for you. I'm just a realist person. Like, there's lots of things that are ideal in Chinese medicine, but you can't necessarily do everything, and you have to balance up between your happiness and your lifestyle, and being a real person. And you go through seasons of change for different reasons. And I became a meat eater because I just wanted to. It wasn't because someone told me I had to. I wasn't unhealthy. I just felt like I was gonna eat meat, and I sort of prepared myself. The first meat I ate was some chicken in China, and it could have been anything. I actually had KFC in China for the first time in my whole life that I'd had KFC, and I was like, oh my God, I probably ate a mouse. Who knows what it was? But the first meat I ate was just chicken with a friend. I went out with a doctor that I'd become friends with over there, and like I was like, I'm gonna eat meat for the first time. Come and have a dinner with me. He was ordering up all these weird dishes, and I'm like, that's not what I meant. Like, I'll have a little bit of chicken, not like, I'm not gonna jump from being a 9 years vegetarian to having a chicken's head and like feet and all these weird things, because they do have all that there. And yeah, anyway, probably making the vegans jump off the stream now. They're just it's gross, it's terrible. But so yeah, I fully understand it. It's like, you have to come to that place in your own way. Yeah, I've come across an ex-vegan. This is Darley Lee says, I've come across an ex-vegan on YouTube that says she had anemia and liver, and the best thing she had found. That says she had anemia and liver. The best thing she found to really help build the iron in her blood. Yeah, glad you're not jumping off. Yeah, liver is good. You don't have to become that liver king guy. My God, I'm sure he's taking steroids. But yeah, liver is good. Organ meats are generally tonify the organs. That's what we think. But the reason why I say bone broth is because I feel that it's more palatable for people to have. I mean, maybe liver's more palatable. I don't know. I feel like just drinking a soup. I found it very hard to make bone broth the first time I made it. As part of the problem when you've been a vegetarian or a vegan and cooking the meats is the smell. Like, you're just not used to that smell. Like, when I became a vegetarian, when I went off being a vegetarian to a meat eater, I'd done that in China, and I wasn't cooking anything. And I was there for a month that time, and then I came home and I would just eat my normal foods, and I would just go out for a steak once a week. And I had no idea how to cook a steak, and I couldn't even buy a steak. I didn't want that meat in my fridge. I just didn't want it there. And then I eventually started eating it. The other thing you could try, Poppy, is having ginger in your diet, like including much more ginger. Ginger helps your stomach and your spleen, like it helps your earth get stronger, and it can actually like warm a lot of things, that like make things more warmer, and that'd be the best food. You could just buy a fresh ginger and just include it in your food as much as you can. And it's good that you don't love smoothies. That's that's definitely going to help. So you want to try to just make your overall diet as warm as you can, and the other thing you could try if you're open to changing a little bit would be eggs, right? So just be a vegan that eats eggs. Eggs also contain a lot of yang because, you know, and they're not actually an animal like product. You know, I'm not sure what the vegan stance on eggs are in that, you know, like the chickens are giving them to you if you were getting them from a, like, what, because part of the ethics of veganism is like, you know, you're not robbing nature of things, like forcing them to produce something for you and treating them in such a bad way. But if you had a pet chicken and it laid an egg, what are you going to do? Throw that egg away? Like, what does that chicken want you to do with that egg? I think it's giving it to you. It's a gift, right? If it was just naturally laying the egg, there you go. Yeah, so that's it. You've got. I'm just reading your comment now. You've been having some eggs lately. Yeah, so I would just do that. Just include the eggs in the diet, right? And you're better off with one natural laid egg than like 5 commercial eggs. Anyway, like the quality of those foods is going to be so much better for you. Anyway, I have to go because I've got a patient in about 15 minutes and I need to just get some things ready for that. So I will see you guys another time. I'm going to try to do more of these streams, and also it's never, I always try to say I'm going to do something and then life goes on. But I try to jump on here when people are awake and, you know, are up or interested. And so thank you so much for jumping on the stream. I'm glad you've enjoyed it. And you can jump on that link that I put in the description if you're interested in the personality types. I can only do 100 of those and then it'll close. So because the thing I use to make the test only lets me give out 100 tests. I didn't realize that when I made it. But yeah, so you could get the test while it lasts and then it resets again, I think. But yeah, so you can be the first ones to get it. I think it'd be interesting for you to know more about yourself, and you can jump on the link to find out about the courses that I put up there, and you can book a free call with me to find out more about the courses if Chinese medicine is something you want to learn about. I've got courses that are just one day, or like, you know, as I think the cheapest course would be like 59 Australian dollars, which is about 40 US, and you know, up to a 12-week course if you want to like really learn about all the things Chinese medicine has to offer for self-care. So thank you so much, everyone. Have a great rest of the day or the night. Thanks, Dan, Poppy, Darlie Lee, Sean Kim. That's a great name. Cool. All right. Thank you.